welcome back to Book and Life Podcast. Today we are going to be on with the legendary, the one and only Relco Wrestling author, Joey Legend. But first, before we get into how he wrestles, writes, family man, deals with rabbits, we're going to hear quickly from Marianne Curley, who was on last week and has the new book, Shadow Time Guardian. And it's book 4, and I'll read you a little bit of the blurb. So it's, the battle is over, the war is won, the prophecy complete, but life can't just pick up where it left off for Ethan, struggling to cope with tragic loss at odds with friends in the Guard. He finds himself adrift, jumping at shadows and sensing someone who can't possibly be there. Blaming herself for the goddess of Lathina's death, Gisela swears revenge and fulfills the Immortals' plan for world domination, but Gisela hadn't planned on love, and that leaves her with an unbearable choice. Should she follow her heart, or the strings of a goddess, short on praise but high on expectations, who continues to pull her from the grave? As the Guard and the Order battle through the past and into the impossible future, darkness lurks around every corner. The fight for the world's survival rests with just one. Is it friend or foe? Who stands in the shadow? So that is out now, so go check out Marianne Curley's new book. And now we're going to jump in with Joe. So Joe and me, we got together a few years ago. We wrote Marie's World. We've then gone on and wrote several spin-offs from that. We've been on a bit of a break, but we have come back to do the Book and Life podcast to talk about his life as a wrestler, as a writer, working with me. He probably has a funny story or two there, and how he balances it all, because he's a family man to the most amazing twins I've ever seen in my life. So take it away, Joe.
Oh, thanks. That's nice of you to say about the kids. Yeah, the kids are easily my best friends. They're going to be 14 on the 25th this month. And, I'm not short. I'm 6'3", so I'm not a giant, but I'm not short. But they're almost as tall as me already, so they're going to be dwarfing me by this time next year and bullying me for the car keys, I'm sure.
Yeah, and patting you on the head and saying, yes, Dad, just go.
Yeah, I can see that coming. What is nice is that my mother's coming over here to visit from Canada. I live in Hanover, Germany, for those who don't know. Yeah. But I'm originally from Toronto, so my mother couldn't come over at Christmas time this year due to all the lockdown nonsense that was going on. And my dad had, of course, passed away in August. It was her first time, not having anybody there at Christmas time. But the blessing is that my kid's birthday's on the 25th, her birthday's on the 27th, and she's going to be here for all of it.
Yeah.
So as far as the family thing, as you were bringing up, goes, that's going to be... we're very much looking forward to that. She can spend a lot of time with her grandkids.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing. I think COVID's taught everybody, and we were talking about this last week, is that you have to kind of, stop and smell the roses, almost.
For about 2 years, I think, yeah.
But it's good because it's taught us all how to pace ourselves and to have a life outside of our passions and our careers and stuff like that. We got married in November.
Right.
And, we had to postpone it 8 times or something because it was COVID. And then when we finally got married, it actually meant a lot because we were able to get both families together, and it was a huge deal for us.
It's the most important part is the family, getting the family in there, yeah.
And I went back to working in the schools during COVID because I wanted to help with the teaching crisis that we were having. And I feel like I did, but I put my writing career on hold for that. And sort of
right.
A wee bit of regret on that side of things for me. But
I don't know if you should regret that, because I think sometimes when you write as much as you do, and you write a lot, is that sometimes, I don't want to say the well runs dry, but sometimes you need to take a step back and get some inspiration and some life experience in other ways to spark new creative ideas. Yeah. So taking a moment to step back and, get some new life experiences probably helped inform the creativity of your writing.
Yeah, and the thing was, I went back to school as well.
Oh, good.
I had just gone into Open University, and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
So it was crazy. crazy. I did my first year and I passed it, and then I was like, I don't want to study this. So I'm now doing an open degree, a bachelor's open degree, and it's been great because I've learned so much about different forms of writing in English, and why you use certain terminology and phrases and words, and it's been great because it's really expanded my writing ability. And I
Good.
think as writers, you have to. I mean, you know this as well as I do, but we all have to explore more. It's almost like we're always in school with writing because we're always having to learn something new, whether it's social media or marketing.
Well, most writing is kind of conveying experience, whether it's a fantasy experience like a Star Wars or a Marvel thing, or whether it's a real life experience, So sometimes, like I say, sometimes you need to have real life experiences even to inform the fantasy experiences. It gives you new ideas. And sometimes, like, you write one thing for so long that I don't want to say the well runs dry, but you've used your best ideas to start with, and now your secondary ideas aren't quite as strong, but you stick with them because they fit the narrative. But then the third one comes along, and it's there's a hockey coach named Don Cherry in Canada. Well, in the NHL, he used to coach for Boston and stuff. Anyway, he's considered a great coach and a great Canadian and all that. And he used to put out these videotapes. I used to get one every year for my brother at Christmas called Don Cherry's Rock'em Sock'em Hockey. It was all the best hits and best fights of, in hockey. And the first tape was gold because it was every great hit and fight from when the tape came out to every year before it that was on film. Then the second one was every good fight and hit from that year, plus what he didn't put in the first one. And then the third one was, even less. And it just, so he needed to take a break from it to try and find some new stuff to put on so it wasn't just secondary stuff.
Yeah.
You want every idea to kind of be the champion idea. But most sequels go with, law of diminishing returns because you were so excited about the first one that you put all your best stuff in there. And then you're trying to find stuff of equal value, but it can't even be equal value because you've set an expectation with the reader.
Yeah.
So now you've got to have something that's as good or better just to seem like it's almost as good because they already have an expectation, whereas the first time you can shock and surprise with anything because it's all new.
I think we got lucky too because with our series we've had Raven. I mean,
yeah.
I've had text conversations with him.
Well, he's an incredibly creative guy.
Yeah, and I think I've driven him slightly insane with Harold because I think
he was close to that anyways.
Yeah, but he loves the fact that Harold's book is going to be the biggest book ever. So
there we go.
He smiles at that, thing. But it's been great because I've sort of because it's been COVID, I've been almost able to drop in with many different wrestlers and have conversations. Like I sat down and I talked with Tommy Dreamer and I wrote an entire wrestling match, just because I sat with Tommy Dreamer for half an hour.
He's a clever guy.
Yeah, and it was good to have that kind of comparison for continuing on the series, but at the same time also having that, I would say, experience of conversations with him.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll have a conversation with Shane Helms and I'll think, oh wow, I can pull on that for this character, I can pull on this for that character, and it's been great. And I got together with Sean back in Sean Flanagan, who's a producer of one of the most incredible companies ever, Magnet Box Films.
Mm-hmm.
And we've started really exploring kayfabe, and I've had to educate him on wrestling, which I'm usually the person with the least amount of wrestling experience or knowledge in the room. So having him come in and me having to explain terminology or the companies to him, and why the companies are different, why the wrestling's different, why the storylines is told different, why there's wrestling agents and managers, and breaking it down's been good in almost a way because I've almost been able to get rid of the bubble that Vince Russo kind of taught me to be in.
Right.
So I feel like I'm kind of expanding, but with you it was really good because you challenged a lot of, I call it like the stuff that Vince kind of got me in the way of doing. You kind of challenged that a little bit. Not saying that my time with Vince was bad because it wasn't, but Vince did show me that a lot of people in wrestling don't think women should be writing wrestling.
Well, Vince, he gets more heat than he deserves, I think. I get longer. You're talking about Vince Russo, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, I get along great with Vince. I think he's a nice guy. I think he's got a lot of good ideas.
He does.
I think that he's like anybody. I don't agree with him 100% of the time. Doesn't mean I hate him. Doesn't mean I think he doesn't have a role to play. I do think that he's so kind of outlandish with a lot of his ideas that sometimes you got to rein him in a bit. And that's why Vince McMahon was good to kind of not let him go too far off the edge where all of a sudden there's nowhere to go. Like, you want to be able to go right up to the edge of the cliff and then get a great view and not fall off the edge. Whereas Vince runs right at that edge and, let the chips fall where they may. And sometimes he needs somebody to hold him by the belt and let him lean over. Get a good look before you fall off this cliff,
Yeah.
But Vince Russo, to his credit, I mean, he got a lot of crap for the David Arquette world champion thing.
Yeah.
And, I mean, yeah, that wasn't a good idea. Totally get it. I understand they were keeping the movie company happy, and it was a huge risk, and it didn't pay off. It's a shame.
Yeah, it is.
But to his credit, to get David Arquette to wrestle on a show and to put the big belt on him I think he lost it in a cage or something like a stacked up cage thing. Can't remember.
Yeah.
But in order to get him there, he was kind of a bigger deal in Hollywood then. He's not as big a deal now. People remember his name a bit, but he's not the kind of close to A-lister he was back then. But he was back then. He was a name. So to get him on there and the insurances that you'd have to pay and go through, and all the different levels of the entertainment business that you'd have to go through Turner, I bet you the decision to put the belt on him probably had to go through at least 15 people.
Yeah.
Who
And
all
he
had to say yeah.
took a lot of people to convince for that, I think.
Right. So he had 15 people all say, yep. He convinced all 15. If it had been a success, all 15 people would have wanted their pat on the back.
Yeah.
But when it didn't work, they all turned their backs and said, no, it was Vince. And to Vince's credit, he didn't list off those 15 people and throw them all under the bus to save his own hide.
No.
He said, no, it was my idea. Didn't work out. So I give him credit for, it was a bad idea, but he was willing to eat crap on that idea and not try to pawn it off on somebody else like all the other people did on him. So I credit Vince for that. I don't think he gets enough credit for that.
I do credit Vince, and I think, when I worked with him in a mentorship role, it was a dream come true because I was an Attitude Kid. I grew up with the Attitude Era. And I had some wrestling sort of interactions before I was in with Vince. And I went to England. I sat down with Kid Cash, and I sat down with Rhino, and, Billy was supposed to be there but never made it. But, like Road Dogg, and I was able to see that I had a mountain and a half to climb because they were honest with me. They're like, women don't get into creative. You're not going to get far with this. And it was nice that they were honest, at least.
Mm-hmm.
They sat down with me and said, women don't really get to being creative. And then with you, it was like, it was almost a drive for me having them say that because it was like, I want to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
And Vince loved the fact that I am so pitbull. He said I'm more of a pitbull than he's ever met in his life. And I didn't give it up, and I kept running with it. I think what I regret is that they were not more open to the fact that I'm a good writer. It doesn't matter on my gender. And I think I've discovered from conversations with people that are working under Vince McMahon, he's not that open to female writers either. And I think it's...
Right, well, yeah, but at the same time, it's because he has no real experience with it. He's never taken a risk on it. How many years did they have WrestleMania main events before they had women do it?
Exactly, but...
Right, so it just takes time to reprogram or rewire somebody's thinking.
Yeah, but we're not going to see, in my time anyway, there is not going to be a female creative writer that hasn't come from his family.
Right.
It's not, we're not going to shatter that glass ceiling anytime soon. And
You never know.
Open to that. So
It just might be right place, right time, right person. It just...
Well, I mean, you look at All Elite Wrestling. How many women do you think's sitting in their creative department?
I truthfully don't know. I know with their thing is they like to let the guys who are in the matches handle their own stuff. So I imagine this is the same with the girls. I don't think they have too many agents. I think they can kind of use some agents,
Yeah.
not
We know there's
not to overshadow the show. or to get credit for the show. But more than anything, like, you have a tag team division, and you have a guy like Arn Anderson and a guy like Tully Blanchard working in the company. I would let them steer the direction of the tag team division because they have such experience working for both big companies through two big waves of a wrestling boom, and that would be great. Whereas, I think they would be good. It would be good to have that. Also, to make sure that there isn't a lot of repetition on the show. Like, I happened to watch one thing of their show, one of their pay-per-views, and I think I saw 6 Canadian destroyers throughout the show.
Yeah.
So they need, I think, an agent there, a couple agents going through, making sure what the big moves are, and then coming back and meeting and saying, all right, where's the overlap?
It's the same with, you see, like, 10 suicide dives.
Yeah.
Like,
It's overkill.
everybody does it. Like, you just expect it in every match now.
Right.
To me...
Which is one of the things that kind of killed Ring of Honor for years.
Yeah.
Is the fact that every match looked identical. It was 6 little guys diving on each other. And you did 20 minutes of, fighting all over the place. And you didn't have to worry about the match going home for a finish until everybody had dove to the floor at least once. Yeah. Then you could start thinking about it. So you don't really have to be interested for the first 20 minutes because there's no concern for win or loss in the first 20 minutes. It's all, hey, look at me. So that's the struggle. They got to put the attention back on the value of winning and losing.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they are not concerned with the fourth wall, right? I like the fact that, because WWE's not doing the fourth wall either, so there's not the same kind of restrictions on that. However, I do think Punk and MJF did it extremely well, but now we've got Eddie Kingston doing it, and we've got Jericho doing it, and it's now become too much. Like,
I agree.
Eddie Kingston's line of, yeah, boys, kayfabe's dead, but we don't need to piss on the grave, was an incredible quote, because it really is what is happening now to me. And I've gotten into it and watched it because I know people that are working backstage, or there's people that's been involved with it that have said, can you look at it? Because you're different. You have a different opinion. You know, there's certain storylines they've botched that could have been more, like, exceedingly good than what it's been done with.
Yeah, which is not a bad idea to have a couple of agents there. I mean, even back in the day, back in the 80s when they didn't have agents, Vince and Pat Patterson would sit down and write, the TVs and write the angles for the next 6 months. Because Pat was brilliant when it came to that sort of thing, especially finishes. Pat was a genius when it came to finishes. Yeah. But he'd sit around with, a couple of the other guys, Terry Garvin and the like, and come up with some ideas. But he'd sit down with the talent too, and let the talent come with it. It's just agency became overkill in WWE, where everything is so tightly scripted and formatted and such that it's lost its spontaneity. Yeah. Now you had the opposite happen with Eric Bischoff, where it's like, spontaneity is the key. So he didn't really format anything, and WCW went completely off the rails. So there's got to be a balance inside of it. There's got to be some spontaneity for sure, but there also has to be some format to make sure that there isn't the same match 6 times throughout the course of a night, and the same angle 6 times throughout the course of the night, and every wrestler doesn't look identical, so it seems like a boring show. There has to be, somebody kind of captaining the variety aspect of the show.
And that's why I think I mean, I've been asked to check out NWA, and I haven't yet, but I will. And that's simply because they've got somebody in the back who's executive producing it. He knows what he's doing. He knows to balance it. He talks to the boys, and okay, he's walking around with a broken foot right now, but he takes the time, and he has that ability to step back, be a writer, be an agent, be, all 3 things. And I admire that more than what I'm seeing from what's already out there. Like, I think I'll probably end up watching NWA only if WWE and All Elite keep going the way they're going. But getting back to us, like, that was what Buddy Does Work was. You were the wrestling side, so you had all the showbiz experience, how wrestling works, and then I had the dance side of things, where it is a little bit like wrestling in some respects, because we had predetermined winners, we had predetermined storylines, our spontaneity was a problem because we didn't have anybody actually, reining us in a little bit. And I think that was more to do with platform and how we were all operating at the time. And you kind of gave me that almost structure when I came into the writing side of it. You're like, oh no, you can't do this because a wrestler will do that. And it was a good, almost like a chess game between the two of us, because I always felt like I was trying to shove my two characters in two different directions, and you almost kind of were reining me in all the time. And I think that's what works, particularly because you've got the softer sides. So I always say, like, you're the Layla kind of side of the brain, and I'm the Marie. I'm the hot head spitfire that just doesn't take 2 seconds to think things through. And I think that's why the twins work as well. And I think that's the fun part of working with you in particular, because you were able to say, "Whoa, Crystal, you're on the." Well, I didn't even stop at the cliff edge. You know that I would just plow right over the end, and you would be like, "Whoa." So yeah.
Well, it's a lot like stand-up comedy in a way. Like you start with some hot material, but you don't just keep hitting hot material the whole time, because it winds up becoming average. Like if you just keep swearing the whole time, and the whole thing's about swearing, like the first couple of swear words, the crowd's like, holy crap, he said that in public on a microphone, oh my god. But if that's your whole shtick, it gets weak.
Yeah.
So you gotta build it up, then you gotta calm them down a bit, then you build them a bit more, then you calm down, then you blow them away at the end with your best material. But you can't give them your best joke, then your second best joke, and just deteriorate through the course thing. You gotta come up with something hot, and then something not quite as hot, but bring them on the journey.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times, every match that I've seen on AEW, like, I like the idea of everybody wants to steal the show. I like the idea that everybody wants the main event, so they want to go out there and earn it. But you also have to have somebody in charge to give them restrictions for where they are on the card. Exactly. Like, they can't be doing tables and barbed wire and all this stuff in the opening match with no backstory to warrant it. Right? But also, you can't have all that in the middle of the card, because these two guys have been fighting, this is their third match together, this is a big blow-off match, and, they have razor wire and all this kind of crap there, that you can't follow that with just a borderline Greco-Roman match.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
With no follow-through, or with no backstory. So there's got to be certain restrictions and containments, and then get the crowd under those restrictions, under those formats. And then you'll be able to get them, when you build towards something else. But each match has to build the crowd up in its own format, and not try to carry over and steal something that should be used later on.
Exactly, and I think I sound like a broken record, because I think I want to do that breaking ceiling thing, and it's not for adulation or because I want to be in the mix. It's not that at all. I think female voices have a place in wrestling, and I would like to see that more. I mean, AJ Lee is the perfect example. She believes the same thing, and she's working with Glow, and she's working with that kind of, she's back in wrestling, but she's in a producer, writer's kind of role, and she's gone away and gotten the writer's experience she needs to make it work. I just think...
Who's this? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
AJ Lee.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
And I respect her for that. She's wrestled, she went away, she learned how to write, and now she's bringing all of that together, and she's taking it into Glow, and I really respect her for that. I just think...
Well, Gail Kim's doing it for Impact.
Yeah, but it's, again, like, that's what, 2 females at how many companies?
Right, but what you're saying is that there's a glass ceiling that can't be broken, but the glass is starting to crack. Yeah. And as these things get successful, people are going to be more open to the idea of it. It's just these girls are going to be carrying the flag first.
Do you think we'll see Vince McMahon hire a head of creative writer?
Vince will hire whoever will make him money. Mm-hmm. Like, evidently, Bret Hart punched him in the eye, and he still brought him back because that was a money move. Yeah. And he had heat with Hogan forever when Hogan left for WCW. Yep. He brought Hogan back. Vince is a guy who will... He's got an expression. Can you swear on the show? I don't want to...
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Vince told a few people, and I won't mention names just because I don't know if they want this mentioned. But at one point, I know he said it's Jim Cornette for sure, so I can mention that name because Jim Cornette has said this in public. He said, at some point, Vince says to you, Jimmy or whatever your name is, at some point in this business, you've got to learn how to eat shit and say you like it. Yeah.
That was my first lesson with Vince Russo.
Yeah, so the thing is, he leads by example in that regard. I mean, how much heat did him and the Ultimate Warrior have? And Warrior beat him in court. And Jesse Ventura beat him in court. And he still had these guys come back because they were ultimately money moves.
Yeah, I mean...
So, yeah, I think if he saw that a woman could write and do well, he might hire Gail Kim away from Impact because he's got more money than Impact.
Yeah,
if he sees Gail Kim and they go, gee whiz, all this stuff is drawing attention and doing well. Who's writing that stuff? Gail Kim says, I wrote all this stuff. I don't see her going because she doesn't like the atmosphere there. She left on pretty sour terms. But I don't think she would not go because she wasn't welcome. She wouldn't go because she didn't like it.
Exactly. But then, again, you got to look at WWE has amassed X's as writers on a regular basis because Vince is a pit bull and he has expectations. But he doesn't have anybody in that room that's fearless enough to say, hey, Vince, this sucks.
Well, nobody has the job security. Like, the one guy who had the job security is Pat Patterson.
Yeah.
So Patterson would tell Vince flat out, Vince, this is no good. This sucks. And Vince would listen to him.
Yeah.
For the most part, from what I see, he's surrounded by yes men who just tell him whatever he wants to hear is great. But even Vince McMahon needs to be reined in, much as Vince Russo or anybody else. Sometimes you get high on... I mean, he was high on the idea of Fandango. Right? And he thought Fandango was going to be the next big thing. Right? He needed somebody to tell him, look, like...
He just wasn't booked very well, though.
Well, no, but I mean, he was essentially brought in like, oh my God, he's this dancer who is wrestling. But the gimmick was always, sure, I'm the best dancer in the world now, watch me wrestle. Which makes no sense. If you're the best dancer in the world, go be a dancer. Yeah. What he should say is, I'm a wrestler who has a background in dance. Watch how dance assists me in being the best wrestler I could be.
Yeah,
then all of a sudden it becomes a different animal. But instead he was so busy trying to be a dancer on a wrestling show that people just laughed at him after a while.
And can I say,
but Vince was excited for that, and he thought that was going to be the next big thing, and he needed somebody to sit him down and say, shouldn't he be an excellent wrestler with a dance background as opposed to an excellent dancer who works for the wrong business?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sorry, as a dancer, if I saw him coming out, I would try and skip ahead because his dancing sucked.
Oh, see, I wouldn't know enough to say.
There were so many mistakes, like, and I felt for Summer Rae, he had to cover it up, like.
But also, if he's a heel, then maybe he's doing his job because he's pissing you off, right?
No, he was desperately trying to get it right. That was what was annoying me. I'm like,
okay,
just take him and give him proper dance lessons because this is ridiculous.
Okay,
but no, I get your.
But either way, that's my point. Is just Vince needed somebody to tell him how to restructure Fandango to make him more marketable. Because from what I'm led to believe, he's a really nice guy and he's good. He's actually quite good at what he does when he's allowed to do his own thing. But when they restricted him with the gimmick in the wrong direction, surprise, surprise, it didn't work. But he was too busy trying to keep the agents happy. But if there's less agents and he's just going out there and getting a reaction from the crowd, I think Vince would have gone with him, which is a lot of what the 80s wrestling was go out there and get yourself over. And when we hear the audience going crazy and we see the audience buying your shirts and bringing signs and all that stuff, we're going to know what to do with you. But Fandango goes out and does exactly what the agents want because the agents immediately go back and say to Vince, he didn't do what we said. Oh, well, then he's not playing ball. Bury him. But if they said he did do what we asked and he didn't get over, well, it's because he sucks. And this poor guy's just in a lose-lose position, which is unfair to him because he might have been wound up being the best whoever was. And we'll never know because of the way they handicapped him.
Exactly. And that actually ties into our first question, which is being sent in to me by some of the readers. So it's about asking you for your opinion about whether we've changed sports romance. And have we changed it for the better? Have we changed it at all? And what do you think of it now when we look at it as like a genre that people are now buying?
Well, I don't know if we've changed that because I think we were the first ones really to do it.
Yeah, we were.
So I think we're kind of throwing darts in the dark and hoping we hit a bullseye.
Yeah, we were.
You know what I mean? So like some of our shots are going to hit and some of them are going to miss, and just we've got to figure out, when we get the reactions for the ones we hit, that's the direction we steer, everything that we want to go. But I mean, we're in a position, because it's kind of a new thing, we're not in a position to kind of look at the template from somebody else who was successful and then capitalize. We've got to be the basement. We got to be the ground floor and the first floor before we start moving towards the penthouse. So I can't say. I'd love to say we changed everything. I don't know if we actually changed anything, other than we've opened up a new door.
Yeah, we've lost people in our army. I always say it's like an army, because Laurie Carrington actually passed away.
I'm sorry, say again?
Laurie Carrington, who did the other wrestling romance novel,
all right,
passed away due to health complications. So I feel like we're almost kind of like the ones carrying the banner now. Because
yeah, there you go, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So we don't even have somebody running a parallel course, and then we can compare notes, like it's
sad. And I mean, I'm looking at the industry as a whole, because that's one of the things that we have to do, is we have to read the markets and constantly learn from the markets. And there is sports romance novels out there, but it's sexy footballers or women getting together with footballers. Like, I mean, I wrote a novel for Tyham Press, and literally the first thing they asked me was, can you do an erotic wrestling storyline? I mean, when I speak to publishers, that's the first thing I get asked is, can you make wrestling sexier? Wrestling's already sexy. You don't need to add anything to it. But I still,
no. What they want is they want an erotic story in the wrestling world.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of what those books you're saying is. I don't know if they're sexy soccer books. Is there erotic books that just we're going to put it in the soccer world, or we're going to put it in the handball world, or whatever world, whatever sports world they want to do it in. They're just using that as the backdrop for the erotic novel, and it doesn't really, like, we're trying to make it blend 50-50, and they're trying to go 80-20.
Yeah.
So that's where we have a definitely a steep hill to climb.
Yeah, we do have a steep hill to climb, and I think particularly I can see dancers actually getting more into reading because of COVID and everything. So I have seen a slight change in our audience base, which is kind of cool. But on the same hand, I see, like, there's wrestling fans coming to us now, which we didn't really have before. So I always thought that was interesting. Do you think that wrestlers are aware of our books and the work that we've done, and have you had responses from it, and what do you think their responses are?
I've had some.
Okay.
I've definitely had some, and most people who've pursued it have told me they like it. Like, when I've signed some books and stuff at wrestling shows and stuff. The thing is that the way a lot of the wrestling fans look at it is they want wrestling first and the romance thing secondary.
Yep.
So it's hard to drag them through, especially because guys try to be young and macho and stuff. I wouldn't read any of that. Like, you got to try and get them past the idea that that it's somehow a girly thing.
Yeah.
So but any of the ones who've read it, it's usually been women. But they've really enjoyed it and asked, when more is coming type thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's on a good start, but it's, like I say, it's a steep hill to climb because it's a huge industry that goes everywhere in the world. I mean, I've been to 46 countries on this job, like Nigeria and Israel and stuff like that. Like, I never would have been to those places if it wasn't for wrestling. So wrestling is everywhere.
Yeah.
It's not like we can just say, well, it's a Pittsburgh thing, so if we just throw everything at Pittsburgh, eventually Pittsburgh will, validate us.
Yeah.
We're trying to drop one drop into an ocean and have everybody pay attention to it. That's a hard thing to do.
So if you had any wrestlers take you aside and say, hey, what was this you've worked on, or like
a few of the British guys have. They've been asking about what's up, and they've seen it. I think they saw it at Waterstones.
Yeah.
They've seen it on sale at Waterstones. They saw my name on it. I was like, hey, holy crap, Joe, what was that? And they'll see it if I sign a book at an autograph signing immediately. Is that your book? Yeah. Wow, really? What's that? And then you kind of explain to them, and they get interested, and then maybe they go out and buy it. Maybe they don't. They haven't told me if they have.
Yeah, but do you think it's more a positive response that you're getting?
Yeah, I haven't heard anybody look at it and just say, "Oh, this is weak sauce." It's always kind of like, "Oh, I never kind of thought of it that way." Like it's kind of almost like they're getting their eyes opened.
I've only had one wrestler come back to me and say, "What dribble is this?" I don't think he was the right audience for it, but
Right.
yeah, I've seen that. I know from like my colleagues that like a lot of the authors have said, "Are you crazy? Why are you going into an industry that's all about TV and all about what you can see and what you're experiencing rather than reading it?" So I mean, I've had responses from that, but I've always sort of been, because you hear from the wrestling side, you hear it from people that are going to be more themselves with you and rather like than their character's opinion on it, if you get me.
Mm-hmm.
um, I think Rhino was very surprised when we worked with him on the cover.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he was intrigued by it more than I think anything else.
Yeah.
But people ask me, like, they say, well, why aren't you sending it to MJF, or why aren't you working with Darby Allin, or why? I get that a lot. I don't think people really understand that when we're doing these books, I'm not running around behind the wrestling scenes handing it to people, if you know what I
Right.
mean. I think that's a myth that's been built, and I don't know where that's come from. But then I get reminded by other friends in wrestling that gossip kind of comes out of nowhere.
Well, wrestling is a very gossipy business.
Yeah.
So, and also, there's so many people who think they know what's going on behind the curtain. And there's plenty of guys who stooge things from behind the curtain, but there's so much that comes at you. And you realize that, 30% of it's true. Like, every girl on the roster, depending on the age of the guys talking about it. Oh, she's a slut who's doing everybody. And it's like, no, she's not.
Yeah,
like, how many of these girls, like, I feel bad for the lady wrestlers, especially WWE, because, like, you get a girl like, let's Mickie James, for argument's sake.
Yeah.
Mickie James is backstage. Now, you're in, Pittsburgh on Monday, and then you're in Philadelphia on Tuesday. You go home Wednesday. But Thursday, you're back on the road, and you're in Tallahassee, Florida, and then Tampa Friday, and Miami Saturday, and so forth, right? So you don't really have any time at home. So the community you live in is the one you travel with. Kind of a circus atmosphere type thing. So who's she going to gravitate to? Especially because if she goes home for one day a week and meets a guy, how understanding is that guy going to be that she's away 6 days a week with well-built young guys doing a job he doesn't fully understand, but she does. So she's inside that community. So she starts dating one of the guys on the show. And, of course, it gets out because wrestling's gossipy. And it's like, oh, Mickie James is dating such and such.
Yep.
Joey Matthews. Oh, okay, well, that's it. But then, sometimes relationships simply don't work out. So her and Joey Matthews break up. And then she starts dating, I don't know, whomever else. Like, I don't think she ever dated Dolph Ziggler, but I'll just throw Dolph Ziggler's name out there. So then she starts dating Dolph Ziggler. The immediate thing is, oh, she's sleeping all over the locker room. No, she's not. She's trying to start a relationship with somebody else. Maybe that'll work, maybe it won't. And then she eventually winds up marrying Nick Aldis, who's a great guy.
But do you not think
but she's immediately painted in that regard because it's so gossipy. I know what's happening. She slept with this guy. She slept with that guy. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. First of all, it's none of your business who she sleeps with.
Exactly.
First and foremost. But number one. Number two, that doesn't, just because she dated a couple of people trying to find somebody she connects with, doesn't mean that she's just a whore out there getting paid to nail all the guys on the roster. Some girls are like that. There are plenty of girls in the business who are like that and just sleep their way through the roster because that's what they feel like doing. There are girls like that.
I've seen that.
But just because there's a couple of them doesn't mean that they're all like that. Yeah. And so I think a lot of the women, a lot of women don't want to look at the wrestling romance idea because they don't think it's realistic because they've heard that all the women are just sluts back there. So in turn, it makes them think like, well, if I read that, are people going to think of me as a slutty woman? And the book is not like that at all.
No.
Yeah, but that's the thing is they're going to say, oh, well, this must be about a girl sleeping with all the wrestlers because that's what I heard they do.
A little bit of a slut. Just a little bit.
Oh, but she wasn't. Well, I don't want to give away the story in case people haven't read it. But she's not going from one bed to the next.
Book 2, I would say she did a little bit.
Not the way people talk about the lady wrestlers.
But I think in wrestling in particular, there's this attitude where if a girl doesn't sleep with a guy that's interested in them, and I know because this has happened to me, and I rebuffed the guy. I won't say his name. And the next thing I heard was from the next city over, he told everyone he had.
Right.
And I was like, wait, I had a roommate
Yeah.
who's my best friend who can contradict this. Like,
Yeah.
you know, sorry, this particular person was phoning me up and saying, hey, can you help me with the situation? So for me, like, I know some of the boys, if they get rebuffed, if they get told no, that's when these stories come out. Like,
yeah, it's an immature thing. It's the school dance. The guy goes up to a girl at a school dance. He's like, 15, she's 15. And he's like, hey, would you like to dance? And it's like halfway through the song, and she wants to dance for a whole song. She's like, well, not on this one. And he's like, yeah, but you're ugly anyways, and walks away. And she's like, no, I only wanted a long dance. Like, you came up to me because you were too scared. You waited till halfway through the song.
yeah, I mean,
But he immediately feels he's got to protect himself by saying, well, I didn't like you anyways. And it's a very immature thing for the guy to do.
And the thing is, this wasn't like a situation for me. I was there professionally. I wasn't there as a ring rat. I wasn't there to, make somebody's bed warm. But they just looked at me and instantly thought, okay, that must be what I was there for. When actually everyone knew I was there because I was being asked to be there as a writer.
Right.
So to me, like, that was my first really bad experience. But then I had, on the back end of it, somebody who took me aside, a friend of ours, and say, you're not that person. Like, we know you didn't do what they said that you did, but you can't get caught in the gossip. You can't be defending your reputation every 5 minutes because you're never going to get anything done.
Mm-hmm.
So I let it go. But I think it is very damaging, and I wonder if that's maybe something that WWE needs to look at as well, because they're the worst. If you look at what happened to Paige and you look at what happened to other female wrestlers and producers, I mean, is it not ridiculous that we're in an environment nowadays that you can't be a woman and taken seriously?
Yeah, but I mean, the way the WWE is because they're so high profile.
Yeah.
Most of the Into It fans are more interested in the backstage stuff than they are in the actual in-ring product. They sit there and complain about Raw every week. 3 hours, this is garbage. Who booked this shit? 2 stars, da-da-da-da-da. Mm-hmm. But they're on their computer every day trying to find out what's happening backstage. Who agented that match? Did Rick Steamboat watch that match and see that arm drag? And what did Rick Steamboat have to say about it? What happened backstage? So when there is no gossip from backstage, they create it.
Yeah.
And it's always juicy gossip when it's, sex sells. How many of the gossip magazines are all just this soccer player went out and was with this page 3 model? Like, I mean, there's a whole industry of that in England. Yeah. And there's the same thing in the States for baseball players and football players and hockey players and basketball players. Holy shit. There's so much of that about basketball players. And some of it's probably true. But there's also plenty of it that isn't. I remember Tom Selleck years ago. They came up with some gossip about him. I think they said he was drunk and doing some inappropriate stuff with women. It was the National Enquirer. I remember that because they were the rag at the time. And most celebrities just kind of come and say, that wasn't me. They're full of crap. The end. And the Enquirer would just keep doing stuff like that. Tom Selleck sued him and won.
Yeah.
That's untrue, and I refuse to. And I think Carol Burnett did too. Yeah. And I think, maybe some of these, these people in the wrestling business maybe should start holding some of these podcasters and stuff to account who throw out this false information. If they say, well, we heard it. Yeah, but did you verify it? No, then you're spreading misinformation about me, and that's slanderous to me. That's libel, whichever one you want to use. And you're going to, number one, you're going to announce publicly that you were talking out your ass. And if you do it again, then I'm going to sue you. Because I don't need my reputation screwed up. I don't need my family ruined. Because you created a rumor just to try and create your own relevance.
Yeah, and make your own.
So maybe WWE needs to have a division to back up talent getting backstage rumors that destroy families and destroy lives.
I think there needs to be an atmosphere where if a woman is in a position where she's getting attacked, she can walk into an office and say, hey, I don't feel safe because this is what's going on. But I don't think there is that.
Since the speaking out movement, I'd say there's a strong one. To the point that guys, it's kind of a shame to watch because guys, backstage almost refuse to talk to a woman if they're alone.
Yeah.
Like, they want to make sure there's a witness there to prove that I was talking to her, but I was always 3 feet away, and I always looked at the floor because I didn't want her to think I was staring at her tits or anything. Yeah. Like, the guys are scared of this speaking out movement. Really, you know, like on one hand, it helped a lot of girls, I think, who had some terrible times. But I think also it's made a lot of guys gun shy of just, you know, treating women as equals in the locker room. Because now we have to step back and put them on a pedestal for fear of being misinterpreted as a compliment being a come on.
Yeah.
Hey, great match. Or, hey, that's new ring gear. That's awesome. Yeah. Oh, he was looking at my new ring gear, but that's a new top, and that's covering my tits. He was looking at my tits. You know, like, she can totally fly off the handle if she chooses to. So guys are, instead of treating women like equals, they're treating them like outcasts just to protect themselves.
Okay, I guess this next question is going to be fun. What are your thoughts if there was a wrestling romance movie, and do you think it would change the game?
I guess it would depend on who made it, who was into it. You know, there'd be a lot of variables. I mean, if The Rock had any involvement, it would probably be successful simply because that guy just has the Midas touch. Like, everything that guy touches turns to gold. So, having his say-so involved might absolutely change perspective entirely. I think the best way to move forward on something like that would be, there's that TV show Heels.
Yeah.
With the guy who was in Green Arrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if they were to infuse that, I haven't watched the show yet. I've heard great things.
It's really
I haven't
good.
watched it yet.
I will say that. It's really good. And
yeah, I haven't heard a bad word about it yet. But if they were to have a proper storyline like that in there, I think that would spark interest for a bigger production, more directed towards the wrestle romance thing.
Yeah.
But I think right now he's just getting he's opening up eyes about backstage stuff, which isn't just cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one step at a time. If he can get a romance story off the ground that people care about, I think that could kick open a big door, and then that would change things.
I think it's a shame that he broke his back because they didn't protect him very well. But
I heard he got hurt. I didn't know the whole story behind it.
Yeah, he did coast to coast and landed wrong and broke a vertebrae in his back.
Ah, shit.
And it was the second day of filming. But giving the guy credit, he kept going.
Yeah. Well, he did. He was in SummerSlam or something like that. Didn't he wrestle?
No.
Cody Rhodes once?
No, he appeared at All Elite Wrestling. He was friends with...
No, he wrestled at like SummerSlam. He was on a WWE show, I'm certain of it. And he wrestled, I believe it was Cody Rhodes.
That was a few years by then. Nothing to
Yeah. But that's the thing, is I think he appreciates the business enough that he's not just there to scratch up a quick payday and no-sell somebody. Like, he's there because he likes it.
Yeah, he was Tony Khan was really supportive of heels. You know, there was CM Punk was on the show as an actor. We had Mick Foley in the show. There was that support base from the wrestling community. I think he could have done with somebody that would have protected him a bit better.
Well, how old is he?
Prepared. He's in his 30s, late 30s.
He's in his late 30s, never done a coast to coast before, and then does it on the show. They should have probably put a stunt guy in for him on that.
I mean, he had a stunt guy, but he wanted to do it himself. And
yeah, but if I'm the director and the whole show hinges on his appearance,
yeah.
No, sorry, Steve.
He wasn't protected, and
yeah.
You know, and I like the fact he took a young wrestler and he put a young wrestler in as the support role. I think that was really important, and it wasn't all about cameoing wrestlers from decades ago. Like it, and they were in there for a purpose. It wasn't like, oh, Mick Foley turned up for no reason, you know. And the cast could act, and it worked. I think there will be a second season because of the way that it's worked, and I actually know the writer that's involved with it, and I've heard that there is another season. And it's a good opportunity for us to open the door a little bit further because they've cracked it. We just need to push it, you know. And
Yeah.
that's what I keep saying to you. Like, sometimes you just need that opportunity to push it through.
Yeah.
And you know, Marie's World isn't over. It's not like we've turned around and said we're not writing any more of it. We are writing it. It just takes us longer because we've got families, we've got lives that get in the way, get in the way of our
absolutely.
writing stuff. So this is a daft question. So I apologize now.
Okay.
Do you think the Darby Allins, Adam Cole's, MJFs could be the next generation to take wrestling romance to the next level?
Ultimately, I can't say they can't, because I was asked years ago about Kevin Owens and what's his name, Generico, and those guys, if they were going to be monster stars, and I was like, the way Vince goes, he likes bodies, and neither one of those guys are bodies. And both those guys had huge key matches at Mania this year. So you never know what's going to kind of get over with the crowd. I think the Darby Allin thing would be a long shot just because he wears the paint and he's trying to be like a new generation Jeff Hardy, like an enigma.
Yeah.
The more we get to know him, the less mystery is going to be, and his whole allure is his mystery.
Yeah.
Right? So I think he'd be a hard one to sell in that regard unless he was just like this appearance and disappearance.
Yeah.
I think MJF, I think he's talented as hell on the mic. So I think he could really do good things because when he speaks, he doesn't sound like he's trying to remember things.
No.
He speaks like he's speaking from the heart.
Yeah.
So I just like his comfort level on the mic. So I think he could act. I think he could do a great job. And who was the other one? There was MJF, Darby Allin, and Adam Cole. Maybe. I think the one thing that's missing is in any romance thing, they want guys who are like mega fit, six packs and stuff like that. None of those guys fit the traditional role. I think one guy has to fit a traditional role, and then you have the tertiary guys who are, wow, he isn't what we expected, but he's great.
Yeah.
So I think there'll probably be a guy who's in wicked good shape, shredded and all that stuff that, ticks all the boxes of standard accepted symbol of beauty.
The first time I saw Adam Cole, I thought, is that Shawn Michaels' son? Right? I don't know why, but it was
he's the Bebe guy?
He just looks so much like Shawn.
He's the Bebe guy, right?
Yeah, he's the Bebe, the boom guy.
Yeah.
But
you see, to me, I've been told numerous times that he looks like me with mono.
He does a little bit. I will say that. See, when his hair is soaking wet, he looks like you. Because that...
But a little version. He's a little guy.
Yeah, he's much smaller than you. But he reminds me of you in that way that he holds himself and the way he moves. But on pure looks, just looking at his face, he looks like a Shawn Michaels son. Like,
I'd have to...
Shawn had spawned another child and didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, you never know. He had a busy, pill-fueled youth that he might have, and you don't even know it.
It could be a different, it could be a line in Marie's World at some point about that. But to me, like, as soon as I saw him, I thought, oh my god, that's Shawn Michaels' son. And I really struggled to get by that, to get into his character, to understand that he's not Shawn Michaels' kid. The super kick does not help, okay?
Yeah, it doesn't just... it doesn't separate him from that, yeah.
Introduction. Super Kicks City, and I'm thinking, are we sure it's not Shawn Michaels' kid? It was so hard for me to get by that.
Yeah.
I think he's exceptionally talented. He's a really awesome guy. He loves his games. He's a gamer.
I've heard that.
He's a wicked romance story with Brett Baker, who's actually his girlfriend.
Right.
And they've been very open about their relationship too, which I think draws a lot more of the female audience in because it's giving them that kind of most females who watch wrestling, there's always a wrestler that they're really hot for because it's a natural draw. But you get them staying because the girls are doing stuff and it's not just all guys in tiny shorts.
Right.
But for me, like, I've not had that sort of love for it since the 90s, so I almost kind of lose that connection sometimes
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah, I
But
get you.
when I got into Elite and I actually like got through a few episodes, I could actually see the ones that I was like, okay, Darby Allin is like, to me was like, okay, that's somebody Marie would have dated, you know?
Right.
Like I felt that connection with someone. Did I want to get on the mic and embarrass MJF? Yes. That was my first gut instinct. I'm like,
Pardon.
I'd love to just have a go and see what I could do with that guy. But that's his draw. That's what makes him popular, is that everybody wants to slap him. And
Yeah, he's a good heel.
Actually, I had this entire time when I was watching it, I actually thought of you as a perfect rivalry for him, simply because you've got that hyper intelligence where you'd always make him dumb. So I did, and I was like, he reminds me, like, there's so many bits of Raven too in Elite, which bugs me, because like Darby does his sitting in the corner thing, and I instantly think it's Raven. Like, it's just
Well, I think it's a crime that this job doesn't have Raven as like the head writer / booker for one of the companies.
I think
it's a shame because he is so gifted. Specifically, I mean, he's into comic books and all that stuff, but he is so specifically gifted in getting wrestling characters over.
Yeah,
he's brilliant. I mean, you watch his feud with the Sandman in the old ECW. That was. You can't say that any of them was a 5-star technical wrestling match. It was a car crash. The whole thing was a car crash.
Yeah.
But it was the most interesting car crash you ever watched. Yeah. He knew exactly how to pace it, exactly how to get most sympathy for the good guy and heat on the bad guy, and just every little piece fit perfectly to make it the most compelling story on the show, even though it was really the least wrestling of anything. It was a fist fight with a lot of like toys, but he made that the most interesting aspect of the show for the time he was doing it. So he's brilliant at it. Now give him 2 guys with characters and gimmicks where they can do something, and I'm telling you, he'd blow the roof off the place with anything he wrote.
I think if MJF wants to be the next big guy that Vince snatches, he needs somebody like Raven. I mean, he had a great run with CM Punk. I'll give him that. He was really interesting with CM Punk, and he held his pace, and it was really well done. But Punk's not Raven, and Punk will never be Raven.
Oh no, Raven changed the business.
Yeah.
I mean, when Raven showed up, all of a sudden, every third guy was wearing jean shorts and a t-shirt and swinging a chair. They just didn't have the timing to swing a chair the way Raven did. Raven would swing a chair, but he knew exactly when to do it to get the best reaction from the crowd. And he had enough story on the babyface that you really cared if that chair landed. Whereas most guys just, well, if I wear a t-shirt, I don't have to work out. If I get a lot of tattoos, then, it won't matter if I work out. And if I just swing this chair really, really hard, people just see how tough I am, and if I bleed, they'll sympathize with me. And Raven knew all the subtext to take all those superficial things, but put them on something that mattered, that absolutely mattered.
I mean, to be honest, like every time we sit down and we write Harold, there's nobody else that would ever fill Raven's shoes on that.
No.
He is like Harold is Raven.
Yeah, like I say, Kurt Angle is a once in a lifetime wrestler, as far as like, oh my god, might be the best in-ring performer ever.
Yeah.
But I would place Raven in the once in a lifetime category of just once in a lifetime professional who understands the job as well as works within it. I mean, he's hurt now. He put his body through the ringer, so he's physically just not able to do what he used to. His neck is a mess and everything else. But the fact is he's just simply his entire mindset is perfect for this job. He found this job and did it brilliantly. Yeah. And the only problem with this business that I think he was so good at it that it bothered people on top, because this guy who they consider their underling was better at it than them. And I think that's a lot of why WWE didn't use him to his potential. I mean, that character needs vignettes and backstory and all that stuff. The promos on the stairs in the park and stuff like that. He needs those. WWE didn't do any of that. They didn't understand it the way he did. And he needed that. And if they'd done it, Raven would have been a top guy.
Yeah. And I mean, I even said this to him, and he's going to tell me stop being mushy, but I said to him, I said, if I had been in the back and you were the guy that walked in, I would have fought tooth and fucking nail for you, because it was something I instantly clicked with. And I think I had started going off wrestling at the Attitude Era because I was losing that love for it. X-Pac wasn't, X-Pac was my first taste of a short guy doing something incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And then Raven came in, and it was Raven that kept me interested in it, and Rhino kept me interested in it. And if it wasn't for those guys, I probably would have drifted off and done other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that to him all the time. I'm like, he's probably one of the biggest influences of my writing, because he makes me think 3D all the time. Like, I think I've even said to you, I'm like, well, if Marie's going to do this, we need to understand why she's doing this.
Yeah.
And
at any given time, anything that Raven had somebody doing in his matches, you could ask why, and he could answer it. And if you couldn't answer why, it means you're talking out your ass.
And he said, he wouldn't do it. And
right.
I respected that. I think, for me, like, I would have loved to have seen him do more, but I would have wanted him to see him do more, not in a wrestling capacity, but almost in a, like, I'm going to interrupt this show in other ways kind of style. Like, I'm going to be the person that takes over the House of Black and manipulates Darby to do things for me. Do you know what I mean? I could almost see him as that monster that's living in the shadows that never gets beat up because he's busy controlling things. And to me, that's how I think he should be used right now. And I think it's a shame he's not. And
it's a crime.
I'm so proud of him for doing that podcast, and the stuff he is doing is fantastic. But I miss him. I genuinely miss him in wrestling.
Yeah, I agree. He can contribute so much.
We don't agree on much.
No, but I agree on Scott. He's like, the business is a worse off place without him. To see, I mean, I don't watch a lot of it, but when I read about what WWE does and such, and I hear people complaining about it all the time. But when I see all that and I read all that, and I just think, you know what? Like, this is what they had was they had a handful of parts. And they put together the simplest, easiest thing, and they just hope it flew. And, 30% of it flew, and 70% of the people crapped on. But because 30% liked it, they're going to keep following through.
Yep.
If you had given all those pieces to Raven, he would have put together a work of art that people would be dying for the next piece.
Yeah. And there's not the minds that... There's so many of that generation that's coming out now that I couldn't imagine how good they would have been if they had a Raven to sit under the tree with,
Yeah.
Like, I find it hilarious Seth Rollins is doing your gimmick, with the whole I'm a visionary and stuff like that. And when he first started doing that, I was like, oh my god, they're ripping off Joe's shit. Like, I literally, I turned to my best friend and went, they're ripping off Joe. Furious.
Yeah, but when it gets on, first one to get it on TV, it's theirs, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, but I still, in my head, because I know you so well, I was like, God damn it, he's ripping off Joe. And to me, I would have loved to have seen what Raven would have done with, like, a Seth Rollins, what he would have done with KO. I don't think...
What he would have done alone with Bray Wyatt.
Yeah, I think they would have been... I would have loved to have seen what Punk would have been if he'd spent more time with Raven.
I think, to be honest, I just think they needed Scott to... They should have had, here's the date, we're pushing Bray, here's the date, he's winning the belt, here's the WrestleMania that he's going to drop it, and let Scott write that.
Yeah.
And that would have made Bray Wyatt would have been the biggest star in the business.
Yeah, by far.
Yeah.
And I feel for the guy because he really went through a lot.
Well, they kept revamping him before the people
got into
the gimmick wasn't cold yet, and they were already killing it to try something new.
Yeah.
So the minute you gravitated to it, they took it away and changed it to something else. And then you gravitate to that, they take it away. Scott would have had continuity, would have had integrity to the character. He probably would have never had the guy do an interview outside of wrestling. He would have been like married to the character and kept kayfabe alive to the point where you start to wonder how much he believes it. Mm-hmm. Which worked tremendously for The Undertaker, because Undertaker, you never saw him talk.
No.
Ever. Until the past couple of years when he was, ready to pack it in.
Yeah.
And that worked for Undertaker because people bought it. They were like, even if they didn't buy it, they were curious how much he bought it.
Yeah.
And Scott would have had Bray Wyatt do the same. I don't think they would have done the Firefly Funhouse.
No, I think that was...
He would have kept it dark and spooky and still believable. I think he would have kept him, even though he's weird, I think he would have kept him in that New Orleans cult leader thing and wouldn't have gone to The Fiend or anything like that. I think he wouldn't have needed to. I think Scott could have made him a lot scarier as a real-life serial killer than as a supernatural monster.
To me, though, I think Bray Wyatt got a lot of stick at the beginning because he was... It was like Vince was trying to reincarnate Raven into Bray. And I
kind of.
That was what a lot of people got from that. And I think... I'm glad Raven didn't watch it, almost, because I think it would have pissed him off in a way, because I think...
If they give him control of it, Scott would have made him the biggest star in the business.
Yeah, but
the only thing they would have made the mistake on is they would have given him more followers.
Yeah.
And he needed to have a tight circle of lunatics. He didn't need to have a whole football team. He might have had one or two more, and then that would be it.
Yeah.
And that's all he needed. He needed a Raven's Nest, not an NWO.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, yeah, I mean, I'm looking out for Scott in a way that I think he should be in the Hall of Fame, and I think he should
absolutely
be recognized for a lot of stuff he's not been recognized for. Because people don't know about the years he spent behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a living secret that nobody talks about because, you know, and I'm sorry, the only reason Impact was as good as it was when he was there is because he had the balls to challenge Vince Russo.
Yeah, I'd say that's part of it. You know, and I don't know if he challenged Vince so much as he confronted Vince and came to concessions where they both agreed on something.
I saw Raven's hand in a lot of that.
Oh, yeah, but I think Raven would be the guy to say, listen, Vince, here's what I'm thinking. And I think Vince is a smart enough guy to go, you know what? I think you're right.
I would have liked to have seen Raven reunite with Paul Heyman for a little bit. I think that would have been fun to watch.
Yeah, it could have been. The way Paul describes it, and the way Scott describes it, is that when he came in and left the Johnny Polo thing and became Raven, he came into ECW to work for Paul and said, this is what I want to do. I want to revamp. I want a new character entirely. I don't want to do my ex-WWE thing. I don't want to do the Scotty Flamingo or Scotty Polo or whatever other stupid thing he was doing.
Yeah.
And Paul was like, all right, what are you thinking? And they sat down and talked about it, and Raven said, this is what I'm thinking. Mm-hmm. And Paul was like, all right, I'm going to let you do it. But Paul was more the green light guy, and Scott was more the creative guy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Paul, spitballed some ideas in there, and then Raven took those and blossomed them.
In as well, to be honest, I think.
What's that?
I think Paul would have reined him in a little bit.
Yeah, maybe a little, but at the same time, he gave Scott the creative freedom to completely open up and do what he wanted, and it was a massive success for the limited budget they had.
Yeah, this is going to be the toughest question for you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to work with any wrestling legendary writer other than Scott, who would it be, and why would it be important for Marie's World?
For Marie's World, see, if it was just for wrestling, I'd say Jake Roberts.
But this is harder.
Yeah. If it was,
you.
Yeah, that's okay. It's fine. If it was just for wrestling, I'd say Jake the Snake.
Yeah.
Simply because I've spent time on the road with him, and when you talk wrestling, he is brilliant. You talk about anything else, he's a maniac. But you talk about wrestling, he's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
As far as, and this is just writers, or is it performers who I think would have a good sense?
Well, let's do both. Let's go for it. Let's do both. Because I know who I want to work with, but
I would say underrated, but I think would lend a lot to it, would be Victoria.
Okay.
Victoria has a good mind for it. The thing is, she knows how to bring the sexy to it without making the sexy the whole thing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
All right? She doesn't just, okay, look at my tits. Like, that isn't her thing.
No.
She does this really cool stuff, and oh, by the way, she's super hyper attractive as well. Like, that's kind of the bonus.
Yeah. For me, it was...
And she's a sweetheart, and she's a smart girl. and just wonderful to hang out with. I mean, I consider her a pal. She's great. I got nothing but good things to say about her. So yeah, maybe for a Marie's project, yeah, Victoria. Victoria would probably be the one I'd trust with it.
I mean, I liked the idea of AJ Lee simply because she was really good at what she did, and the things she.
I don't know enough about her to say. I might agree with you if I saw more of her stuff, but I haven't watched enough to be able to agree entirely. But maybe
she was one of them. Like, I did spend time with Vince Russo, and I have taught Marie's World with Vince Russo. That I can people say I haven't, but I have actually. He probably was the explosion underneath me that made me reach out to you and to actually push it further, because he said team up with a wrestler because you're not a wrestler and this isn't going to work unless you work with a wrestler. So I would love to work with Paul simply because I think, well, you know how my brain works, and Raven says there's, I think there's a lot of moments I remind him of him in the regard that I get too much into my characters and I get sort of forget the lines, if you know what I mean. So I think if I was to work with anyone other than you or Raven, it would be Paulie, and I just think it would be interesting to see what would happen in a room between me and him, to be honest.
Yeah, Paul could definitely be a part of it. I don't know if I think he'd definitely have the action stuff down and he have the intrigue stuff down. I just don't know how he'd be on the romance side of it. I've never seen him implement any of that.
No, he would give me the creative freedom to do a lot of the stuff that I like to do with it and that I like to push with it. Like, I mean, the sexy scene in the kitchen with Purslane was all me, and you were like, should we rein it in a little bit? You know, like, but it worked. You know, like me taking that chance, and it worked. But I think he would rein me in enough that it would be creatively intense, but it wouldn't be too much.
Right. No, Paul definitely he's an excellent storyteller for sure.
Yeah, and I think he would give me the confidence to kind of go to that next level with it. I think
he also knows how to weave several plot lines in and then have them come to a crescendo at the end of it.
Yeah, and that's really important for Marie's World, because when we look at the amount of characters we have in it, going through a book, it's quite intense from that perspective.
Yeah, so Paul'd be a good guy for that, for sure.
So the next one is, what's our plans for Marie's World, and what's our dreams for it?
I don't know if we're allowed to say the plans. I don't know how much
either, but this is questions that we have to answer because this is what the readers want to know. So.
Okay, if I can stay as vague as possible.
Yeah, we have to.
Is we'd like to have it come alive in some live action form.
Yeah.
Whether TV, movie, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
That would be the short term plan would be to get the first one out in that form. Yeah. The long term plan would be to have it branch out into several different, sequels and side stories and stuff like that. But ultimately to bring it to a visual medium and not just keep it books.
So do you think we're going to do the next one? Because I know the next one's supposed to be Will's story.
Right.
But yeah, they're asking if we're actually going to do it, and I don't have an answer for that one right now.
I like to hope so. We got to make sure that everything. Each one's got to be viable, and I wouldn't want to do one that wasn't worthwhile, just because I want the title out there. It's not. It doesn't reward the readers of the other ones to take a bunch of good ones and then say, "Well, you needed this name here. Take this name and shut up." That's not very. That's.
And I think we were talking about it not that long ago, but Will is a kind of the turning point character for Layla, because I think he makes Layla realize what she's gotten herself into.
Right.
At the same time, it's our introduction to the brothers and why the brothers are maybe acting the way that they are and doing the things that they are. And I think it's going to be fun exploring Will's connection with Charlie.
Right.
We had that connection of Charlie trained them.
Right.
So is Charlie going to go into cahoots with them?
Right. Well, that's the thing, is we got to make sure that we keep the intrigue alive.
Yeah.
And not just throw it out there for the sake of throwing it out there.
Yeah, and Charlie's a huge part of it. And I mean, do you want to go on record and say where Charlie came from? Because Charlie was never in the original idea to till you come on?
Well, you go ahead if you want to. I'm gonna. This whole thing started as kind of your baby, so I don't want to speak out of school.
No, it's both ours because I would never. I mean,
This was all your idea to begin with. To begin with, this was your baby, and then you brought me on board. But this was you're the mother to this whole thing.
I'm getting the bin stuff. Am I getting it dumped on my shoulders?
No. If it was bad, it'd be dumped on your shoulders. You're getting credit.
Oh, is that credit? Oh, okay.
Yes. Because this started off with your idea, and then we built it from there.
Because I never thought of the girl's father as like an important part of it, and I think coming in as the dad of twins was really important because you had that kind of connection. You already the experience of doing that whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think you had the questions that needed to be answered, like, would Charlie tell his daughters about wrestling? Why wouldn't he tell them? And, you know, I think it's every wrestler's worst nightmare to have two daughters and then let them in the business because they know of all the stuff that goes on there.
Well, in general, it's like we speak about it in wrestling. I talked to this with D'Lo Brown, who's one of the best, most underrated guys ever in the job. Super guy. But he had his daughter, Bria. We called her Booyah. Don't ask me why. But we hadn't talked in a while, and then I was messaging with a friend of mine, and they happened to be having dinner together. I said, tell D'Lo I said hi. And he said, D'Lo says you're a prick and go fuck yourself. And I was like, right? Yeah. And so we joked around for a few minutes, and I said, how's Booyah? And he said she was 16 or 17. I said, she's, at boyfriend age. Yeah. And he's just like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, well, he goes, that's the difference between having a son or a daughter. Like, with a son, you only worry about one dick. With a daughter, you worry about every dick in the world. Yeah. Now you got to double that with twins.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Do you not think, though, that if you were Marie and Layla's father, that you would be white-haired by now?
I am white-haired. I color my hair.
Yeah, I know, but it would be worse. Would you not agree? Because I think Marie would have had you in an early grave by now.
Probably, yeah. I wouldn't be white-haired. I'd be dead. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I laugh and I joke about that, but I think I said to Rhino, I'm like, if she was alive, I don't think Joe could have. I thought it was his daughter. I don't think he would have survived her. I think he would have been in so many fistfights.
He's got a daughter with a pretty independent spirit too, so I see him struggling. Playing his stress card out pretty strong sometimes. Adores her to death. I mean, she lives 15 minutes from me. Yeah. And he's still the most loving father you could ask for. Yeah. But also, on top of it, he can't even look after her because he's in Detroit, in Monroe, Michigan specifically, and she's all the way over here in Germany. So he's got that stress doubled. I don't envy him. At least with my boys, like they're in the next room usually, so I can go and check on them, make sure they're okay.
Are you dreading the dating period? Because it's coming up.
No. My boys they're growing into good men. I have every trust in the world that they are confident. Because I know Connor's had a couple of girlfriends.
All right. So
yeah. And the one girl was very interested in him. Mm-hmm. I think he was 9 or 10. And she was very interested in him, and she asked him to be her boyfriend. Yeah. And he took her aside so she wouldn't be embarrassed in front of a bunch of people. And rather than being a standard, 9 or 10-year-old and, ooh, girls, you suck, the standard stupid, immature boy thing, Connor took her aside and said, listen, I'm 10, and I don't think I'm ready to do something like that. I think you're great, and I want to be friends with you. Yeah. But I don't want to mislead you. And he did that at 10 years old, so I've got every confidence that my boys will do the right thing moving forward when dating becomes more prevalent in their lives.
Do you think that they'll follow you into wrestling?
Right now, they're hugely into handball.
All right.
Maverick, he's the best goalie in his age group and in the age group above. They move him back and forth between the two age groups. Connor got in late. He came in about 2 years after Maverick because he was doing jiu-jitsu first. Yeah. He just wanted to do handball, so broke my heart a bit that he left jiu-jitsu because I did the 4 black belts in karate and kung fu, so I was all about, yes, he's into martial arts like me. But he had to follow his heart. Yeah, he had to follow his heart, and I can't have him follow my heart. He's got to follow his own heart, and I just got to support him. And he, so now he's one of the hardest throwers in his league.
Yeah.
And getting better and better and better all the time. Scores a lot. So right now, handball's kind of their thing. They've only ever seen a bit of my wrestling, and I think it was 3 or 4 days before my 50th birthday, they finally got to see me wrestle live for the first time. Because in Niedersachsen, the state I live in, you have to be 15 or older to go to a wrestling show.
Oh, right, okay.
So I was wrestling up in the Harz, which is in the next kind of state over. It's only like an hour and a half away. But I brought them, and I did the main event against this guy, the Fast Time Mudo, I think his name is. Real nice guy. Anyways, I beat Mudo. We had, 800 or 900 people.
Yeah.
Standing room, fucking people going crazy. And then when I got the win, the kids got to see me, through the whole match. They were right up against the gate watching. Yeah. And then once I won, I brought them into the ring. Yeah. And the whole crowd was, little legends, clap, 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 little, doing that. And then we did my zigazagga thing and played with the crowd. And I just thought, this is the best 50th birthday gift I could have had.
Yeah. It was the moment you were looking forward to, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And just the fact that, their other friends can say, yeah, my parents, we went and saw a big soccer game. And the other friend's like, oh, yeah, we went to Disney World. And my boys, we were in the ring after the main event where my dad won a match and the crowd was chanting for us. They've got that nobody else in their class has.
Yeah, and that's a good thing about it, yeah.
Yeah, so right now I don't see them following me into wrestling. They make mention of it every now and again. But because it's every now and again, I think it's just kind of a fleeting, wouldn't this be neat, as opposed to, wow, I want to do this.
Yeah, I think to be honest with the way that your mind works, if they did go in, they've got a good chance of being really big because of the knowledge that you've gained already and the people you've worked with and the people you've trained.
Oh, I could kick open a lot of doors for them, and I'd make sure they were well trained. I mean, I'm teaching here, and in like a half hour, I got to go teach a class. So, I mean, I've got students here. I've got a gym here. I could bring them in to train there if they were interested.
Yeah. But that's good, though, because it means that it's options and stuff.
Yeah. They always have that door open should they ever choose to.
Because I look on it like some people said, well, would my daughter go into the style of dancing I went into? Or, because, I mean, I broke doors when I went and did what I did. I wish I had a bit more training before I done it. As I say, rubbing my neck, thinking on it. But yeah, I get asked that a lot. And when I look at the dance studios in my area, I've gone snooping because when you write Marie's World, you have to go snooping. There's a lot of my stuff out there I don't get credit for.
Yeah.
And I've discovered it. And I'm like, oh, that's my move. Hang on, why is that my move? Why is my move there? It's curious for me to watch the street dancing now because I look a lot older now, which I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
No.
People don't necessarily recognize me anymore, so I'm able to snoop on the dance stuff and see it. And one of them thought I had vanished completely, and they were doing an homage to me in Glasgow. And I was walking down, and I saw it, and it was my hand signals they were throwing up. And I thought, wait, is my stuff still lingering around? This is 15, 16 years later, and it's still lingering around.
Well, I mean, the whole Brian Danielson yes, yes, yes thing. That started in 2009, 2010?
2008, I thought it was.
Okay, maybe 2008. You go back and look at the pay-per-view I did in Scotland for WWA in 2002. 2002 or 2003. I think it was 2002. It was WWA Revolution or Retribution or something like that. But either way, if you watch, there's me and Mike Sanders. We did a promo segment early, and then we did the match later on the night. Yeah. In the promo segment, I had the yes, yes, yes thing going years before Danielson did it. Yeah. And the curb stomp. I was wrestling on a show in Austria in 2002, 2004, 2004 maybe. And a guy named Tyler Black was on the show with me, who ultimately becomes Seth Rollins. Yeah. And on that show, yes, it was 2004 because I'd left Windsor. In Windsor, I'd invented the curb stomp. and
Did that bother you though?
I'd used it in Japan and a few other places, and then I did it in that match, and Rollins came up to me because he was just, everybody said, "Oh, he's this Ring of Honor guy." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I know Kerry Silkin. I met him in Puerto Rico. He's a super guy. So yeah, we have a common person we can say hi about and break the ice with. And he was like, "I saw your match, good match." I'm like, "Oh, thank you." He goes, "That stomp thing's cool." I'm like, "Thanks." Turns out he likes it a lot because he wound up doing it. Yeah, well, he's the got it on TV first, so people think it's his.
Yeah, and it's weird to me because like dancing's not something that's televised, right? So I don't get like how my moves have spread the way that they have.
Well, it's probably a word of mouth thing.
No, I think it was the stuff like because I did a lot of stuff in Edinburgh. I think it was. Was it Edinburgh or Dundee? I'm not sure. I wasn't driving, so I never knew. But I look at the stuff that was done in London just before the pandemic, and I think I remember sending you a screenshot of a tweet of them actually kind of patting me on the back for a lot of the break stuff that I did, and it's still used. Like they still have that homage moment of they pick somebody from the past and they bring up their hand signals or they do a certain move in homage to them. I just never thought I'd be one of the legends that was still like a ghost floating about this long after. But I do know that the book circulated, so a lot of the dance stuff that I put in the book is circulated. So
oh, there you go.
Yeah, and it's weird. Like somebody came up to me and said the best part of my dancing wasn't actually because I'm not very athletic. I'll openly admit that. And you discovered how difficult it is to work with a dancer yourself when you did your music video. But like my best stuff, everyone said was when I was talking. Like when I did you would call it promo, we just called it talking shit.
Shit talking, yeah.
You know, like I went out and I would pick that particular person apart. That was what I was good at. I could go and pick a character apart within 2 minutes, and it worked for Marie for as long as I did it. But that's what I'm remembered for, not the stands, not the moves, not the hand gestures, or the fact that I had the first belt made to be, obnoxious. I had my name up, in diamonds and stuff like that. None of that's remembered. It's my ability to pick people apart that's remembered.
Right, but I mean, look at Ric Flair.
Yeah.
More people remember him for Woo than all the things he did in wrestling.
Yeah.
They remember for Woo.
Yeah.
So don't be surprised if there's one hook that hooked. I mean, for all the great matches Roddy Piper had, he's just remembered for being a great shit talker. And
I never thought I would be remembered for that. I think specifically when I went out there, I was looking to break the dance mold. So like I was trying to prove that dancing wasn't supposed to just be in a studio or on a stage, and I did that. But I was almost compared to like people said I should have been in wrestling rather than dancing, and that always sucked. Like I had dancers telling me, you don't belong here. You should be going and doing wrestling or something like that. And if I hadn't had that bad experience in Aberdeen with that wrestling company, who knows? I probably would have. But I think it's weird to me that that's my legacy, or that's always going to be my legacy, is my ability to talk and take people apart. And I don't even know where that came from. That was just...
Oh, but if it worked, it worked.
Yeah. And that's what I'm remembered for.
I mean, look at Scotty 2 Hotty. He's a good worker.
Yeah.
You remember the worm, the most non-wrestling move
in the world.
In wrestling. But he found something that people connected with, so don't question it, run with it.
Yeah, and I mean, that was the thing. If you're in a nightclub full of drunk people, you got to come up with something to get to focus on you, and that was
find your hook.
Yeah. I'm just glad that Marie gets to live on through this.
Yeah.
And it's great because in a couple of weeks we're going to have Sean Flanagan on from Magnetic Box Films, and we're going to be talking about like working on stuff together. And I mean, I've been slammed. If anyone knows this, I was recording my podcast at midnight last night. I had to be up for an early morning meeting, and then I've come on and recorded with you today. And I am just back-to-back slammed at the moment because I'm out there constantly now trying to promote and work in the entertainment industry, but I'm also writing. So it's kind of like I've gone triple barrel now because I've also got the podcast. I don't know if I ever thought that was a good idea or not, but the whole point of this was to bring authors in and make them more human and make
Hello?
people realize we have a life outside of this whole dig.
Hello?
So,
There we go.
Are you reading books, and what are you reading?
Um,
We've talked everything else. We've talked life. We've talked story. We've talked our writing careers. Let's talk about books that you should be reading or have.
mostly what I do get through into a book. Right now, my favorite author is Chuck Palahniuk.
All right. Okay.
Guy who wrote Fight Club.
Yeah.
Just
So why?
everything he's ever written is an absolute diamond. The one thing he wrote, which is really affecting, is he wrote a short story for Playboy. When Tori Wilson, when she put her photos in Playboy in the early 2000s, he wrote a story exclusively for Playboy.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading it. A bunch of us were driving to Cleveland to do a gig for Cleveland All Pro. And so I thought I'd read the story. Oh, Chuck Palahniuk, great. And I got through the story, and I had a cold sweat. And I was like oh my God. That was the most messed up thing I ever read. And my buddy Tyson Dukes, a student of mine, he's like, you okay? I said, I just read the most messed up thing I ever read in my life.
Yeah.
And he says, can I read it? I'm like, I don't want to do that to you. Like, it's really screwed up.
Messed up, yeah.
He's like, oh, come on. I wouldn't do it. And then we stopped for a piss break. And then I started thinking, you know what? I probably got, like, motion sickness from reading while driving, and now I'm going to look a real sissy if he reads it and he feels fine, right?
Yeah.
But I thought, screw it, he's bugging me. All right, read the stupid thing. So I give him the magazine. We pull into Cleveland and into the show, and as I'm sitting there, over my shoulder, the magazine comes trembling. And I look at him, and he's ghost white, cold sweat. Oh my God, that is the most screwed up thing I ever read.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go into detail because I can't do it justice.
Mm-hmm.
I just encourage, if you can find a copy of that Playboy article that he wrote the story for, it is the most messed up thing you'll ever read. But it's good writing because it affected me.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, if it sticks with you, that's the most important thing, is having emotional connection to movies. So you're gonna get the fun part because we've covered books, we've covered wrestling, we've covered life. So this is the part where we do the word game.
Right.
This is the part that you're probably gonna hate because everybody hates it so far. So I'm just gonna say like 8 words. You just say words back that comes to mind. Okay. So I think, oh gosh, I wrote these down and then I forgot them. So I'll start off with wood.
With what?
Wood.
Wood, like
Yeah.
lumber.
Like wood. Yeah, lumber. Wood.
Wood. Log cabin, because I'm dying to live in a log cabin.
Well, my next one's gonna be forest, so I guess that's gonna be the answer for that too, isn't it?
My wood cabin in the forest, yeah.
Pine needles.
Christmas tree. Leather. The jacket I wear when I go out to cut down a Christmas tree.
Okay. I'll go with that. Peppermint was the next one. I don't know why that was in there, but
Peppermint?
yeah.
That would be candy canes.
And then the final one's orange.
Orange. Those god-awful chocolate oranges that I can't stand but the wife likes. And they're always around at Christmas.
There you go. But the idea
Turn this into a holiday episode. I don't know how that happened.
I know. But the idea of the game is just to kind of like show like how writers take a word and it kind of explodes into something.
Yeah, it just threw me into a Christmas theme. Right?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, I know
Yeah.
you love Christmas, so I probably
Well, I do.
see you did that.
Yeah.
So the plan is we're gonna have you back when we hit, I think it's 100 episodes.
Okay.
Or if we release a book before then.
Sure. No,
So
buzz me and let me know when you want me. It's okay.
Yeah, you're not too far away. So before we go off, the final question I've got to ask is: if there was a wrestler that you could give the book to, who would it be?
I can give the book
I
to.
And you have to have a conversation with them. You can't just like hand the book and run away.
Honestly, John Cena.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, you're gonna have to explain that one to me because we've talked a lot about good people.
I I think he's a really good human being for all the charity work he does and the Make-A-Wish and stuff like that. I think if he liked it, he'd be able to promote it in the most positive way worldwide, in the most positive light possible. Yeah. And I think he's a smart guy that doesn't, because he looks like such a football jock. He looks like a lunkhead, but he's a really smart guy.
Exactly that as well, which isn't helping him.
And he's funny. He's got a great sense of humor. So I think we could have a good, positive, funny conversation that will be productive around the book. And I think if he were to give it a thumbs up, a lot of other people would give it a chance too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. For me, if I was to walk over to someone and hand them the book and I had to have a conversation with them, I think my choice will surprise people, because I think people will be like, well, why would you do that? But it would be Cody Rhodes.
Why not?
Because I think his way of looking at wrestling is completely different. And I think me and him could probably change a lot of people's minds with it, because he's done that with Tony Khan. So he'll be able to do that with Marie as well. And
I agree.
To me that he's got the gumption to stick with it too. So I would.
Sure.
Well, that's the end of our podcast for today. Next week we're going to have another surprise guest, and you never know, Joe might have some wrestling friends who want to come on. So yeah, get your questions ready. You all know what to do. This is going to be on Spotify. We're on Alexis. We're on Audible. Everywhere you get your podcast except for iTunes. We are on everything.
Yeah, and I'm also on a podcast usually every Thursday with a friend of mine from Canada called Oz the Wise.
Yeah,
and we just shoot the shit about nothing. Like, there's no real format. It's just us, as if we were just on the phone bullshitting with each other.
Yeah, well,
but I'm on that all the time, just because he asked me to be, and he's a pal since high school, so why wouldn't I help a buddy out?
Yeah, exactly. And the whole idea of this was just people sitting down, having a conversation about books, wrestling, or writing, or the things that we do and that we're passionate about. And that's the whole point. We're human beings outside of the books, outside of the computer screens, and wrestlers are just as much in that situation as we are. And I think the mythology needs to be changed, and that's part of what we're doing here. So we never got to talk about the bunnies, though. We'll have to do that next time.
My perfect bunnies.
Yeah, your legendary bunnies.
Yep. Yeah. We have the great and powerful Ahsoka Tano, protector of the universe and jewel of the Jedi Order. We have Lady Timber, warrior princess and master of kung fu. And we've got Dr. Frederick Bonkers, bunny psychologist. He's in your head, man. Those are my bunnies.
We look forward to doing that, and it's been great having you on.
Thank you for having me.